What if we were all in a room together right now? I'd probably ask around and ask how many people remember who or know who Zacchaeus is. And I would ask for a show of hands to see how many people know Zacchaeus or maybe even know the song. There's actually a children's song we like to sing about Zacchaeus. But maybe you're not familiar with Zacchaeus, and that's okay, because we're going to be talking about him today in our Wednesday Spotlight, and that's going to be found in Luke chapter 19. In the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 19, as Jesus was constantly traveling around and coming into contact with various people, and sometimes in some folks' eyes, some of the most unlikely people, but the very ones that God sent Jesus to save, and so to save us all, really. But we're going to see this today in a great story about Zacchaeus, a man whose heart truly was seeking the Lord, and he showed that in his actions and in the good news of salvation that he found that day. So read with me, starting in Luke chapter 19 and verse 1. When Jesus had entered and passed through Jericho, that behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was actually a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Now, we're not given a whole lot of information, as we'll see here, about Zacchaeus, but what we are told, and kind of some of the responses we'll see in just a moment, that tax collectors in that day and time, many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them were sinful. They were sort of in their own category, even as Jesus often referred to, and as the people referred to, tax collectors and sinners. They kind of had their own special category, but they often did cheat the people out of their money, various other things. They were also working for the Roman, government, which the Jews didn't like. All those kinds of things. So Zacchaeus wasn't exactly probably the most liked guy in the neighborhood, so to speak. But here is Zacchaeus. He's a wealthy man. And if, by chance, from his tax collecting job and his taking advantage of people, that could be part of the reason he was a rich man. But notice verse 3. That this Zacchaeus sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So, a little vertically challenged. He's not the tallest guy in the world, and so he apparently has heard of Jesus or knows Jesus is coming, and he's wanted to know, who is this Jesus? He's wanted to know more about him, but he can't see Jesus. He can't really get a good look, can't really get a good position to, be there listening and watching and hearing all of the things going on. And so, that would be frustrating, but he's intrigued, he's excited, he's curious, he's really wanting to know Jesus. And so, verse 4, he runs ahead, he climbs up into a sycamore tree to be able to see Jesus, for Jesus was going to be passing by that way. So he wants to get up in a tree. He knows Jesus is going to pass by. He wants to see him, to watch him, his excitement. This is, he could have just, before giving up, said, well, I can't see, I can't get into the crowd. Oh, well, won't worry about it. I'll just go my way, go home, go back to work. But he didn't. This is how much Zacchaeus really wants to know about Jesus, is he is willing to run ahead and climb up in a tree and wait for Jesus to pass by. And I wonder if, what people thought of Zacchaeus. I don't know, seeing a grown man climbing up into that tree and sitting there and waiting. I don't know, maybe some thought it was curious or funny, or, maybe that's just a normal thing people did. But I think this shows a great faith, and or at least interest of faith and curiosity on Zacchaeus' part. And imagine then, verse 5, that when Jesus came to the place, he is passing by where Zacchaeus is up in the tree. Imagine what's going through Zacchaeus' mind and in heart and his emotions and excitement and being startled. And when Jesus stops there, as Jesus is coming, he came to that place, Jesus looks up, sees Zacchaeus, and speaks to Zacchaeus, calls him by name. Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. How exciting. As we're going to see that, Zacchaeus does, verse 6, he made haste, he hurried down, he received Jesus joyfully. He is excited. I mean, here he is, he's just trying to get a glimpse, he's just trying to know more about Jesus, he can't see, he climbs up in a tree, all he wants to do is watch Jesus walk by with the crowd, and to his amazement and surprise, I'm sure, the very one he wants to know, the very one he wants to see, stops, acknowledges him, calls him by name, and says, come down because I'm going to your house. I'm staying at your house today. I mean, imagine the emotions, the excitement, the joy that Zacchaeus had and showed. How happy he must have been, how happy he was to be able to receive Jesus. Not only in passing, not only in a passing glance or conversation, but into his own home. But then, here's where things get a bit frustrating, but a good opportunity to learn. That when those around saw it, they all complained, they grumbled about Jesus because, oh no, he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. And so now as Jesus has, called Zacchaeus and says, hey, come on, I'm going to your house. Now people, obviously could hear him and they were saying, oh no, he's going to this sinner's house, this tax collector's house. He's going to Zacchaeus' house. What's he thinking? Zacchaeus obviously heard this and knew this because he stood and says to the Lord and says, look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor. And if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, which, apparently he probably did, but he says, I restore it fourfold. I mean, Zacchaeus has a heart that, okay, yeah, he's obviously sinned like everybody has. Maybe in his own way as a tax collector, he's taken advantage of people, but he clearly has had a change of heart. He clearly has a willingness to change, a willingness to repent, a willingness to listen to Jesus and say, hey, I'm ready and willing to change my life and my ways and what I'm doing. He says, I give to the poor. If I've cheated anybody, I restore it. He's a man who is willing to do what is right at this point in time. And notice Jesus' answer and response when he says in verses 9 and 10, the most beautiful words ever. When Jesus said to Zacchaeus, today salvation has come to this house, because he is also a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. Salvation has come to this house today. Was Zacchaeus a sinner? Yeah. But why did Jesus come to this earth? Why was Jesus traveling with people, talking with people, doing miracles? Why did Jesus want to go to Zacchaeus' house? Because Jesus was on a mission to seek and to save the lost, just like the lost man Zacchaeus. And just as Zacchaeus joyfully accepted Jesus because it meant he could know salvation. And that was Jesus' point, is Zacchaeus, today, I'm going to tell you about salvation. And Zacchaeus was obviously a man who was ready and eager and wanting to know about salvation, and Jesus was going to make that happen. What I see in Zacchaeus is an example really of truly seeking the Lord, being willing to listen, to know Jesus, being willing to go to whatever lengths to know Jesus, that just as, okay, simply put here, he's, a shorter man. He can't see Jesus through the crowd, but he doesn't give up. He's willing to go climb a tree. What are we willing to do today? If you put it, make it an illustration out of it, what are we willing to do when things get in our way of being able to see Jesus or know Jesus? Do we make excuses? Do we give up? Do we, say, well, too bad? Or what are we willing to do? What are we willing to overcome? What are we willing to look past? What are we willing to do to know Jesus, to know God, to know salvation? And then like Zacchaeus, what are we willing to do to change? Zacchaeus wasn't, accepting Jesus into his home and going to listen to Jesus and then say, oh, well, Jesus, that's all great and good, but I'm going to stay the way I am. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep cheating people. I'm going to keep, money from the poor. No, Zacchaeus was a man who was ready and willing to change. He was a man who was ready and willing to know what it meant to have salvation and to live faithfully and righteously for God by the grace and mercy of God. Are we willing to change? Are we willing to give ourselves to the Lord? Now, sometimes when we do change, unfortunately, people may not be willing to believe us or, see the change in us. Zacchaeus, people were saying, oh, well, he's, just a sinner, but he's like, hey, but I'm changing my life. We got to show that to people. Zacchaeus was an example to those, hey, I'm changing. And then to remember, we all need that salvation. We all need to know Jesus and the salvation he has brought. Because Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Like Zacchaeus, we need to come to know Jesus, come to know his word, and to obey and to be excited and joyful. Now, I wish we knew more about Zacchaeus after this, and hopefully he became a faithful follower of Jesus and one day a Christian and obeying the gospel after Jesus' death and resurrection. I don't know. I hope so. I wish we knew more about Zacchaeus, but we just don't. But what we can learn from his example here in Luke 19 is that eagerness, that fire, that desire to know God and to give our hearts to him. Be a Zacchaeus. Climb the tree. See Jesus. Welcome Jesus into your home. And listen and obey what he tells us about salvation and how to live. God bless.